For most of his life, Prince Harry existed inside a system designed to absorb shock. Mistakes were softened, consequences were delayed. Protection was permanent. Even rebellion had boundaries, because the institution itself acted as a shield, quietly repairing damage and restoring balance. That shield is gone. What is unfolding now is not a tabloid scandal or a temporary downturn in popularity. It is something far more serious and far more final. Prince Harry is no longer being buffered by the monarchy. He is no longer being protected by royal machinery. And according to multiple royal observers, security analysts, and palace-adjacent sources, he is no longer being factored into the institution's future planning. This is exile, not declared, but enforced. In recent months, reports have surfaced that would have once been unthinkable. Claims that Harry has at times slept in a car, that he no longer enjoys consistent protection, that a luxury mansion connected to his post-royal life has been abruptly sealed, and that behind the scenes, the royal family has moved with quiet precision to consolidate control, stabilize the line of succession, and recenter its priorities without him. What makes this moment extraordinary is not its drama, but its silence. There has been no palace statement denying the reports, no emotional counterattack, no visible attempt at reconciliation. Instead, there has been something colder and more powerful: administrative withdrawal. Royal insiders say the shift did not happen suddenly. It was incremental, deliberate, and carefully justified. Access was reduced. Privileges became conditional. Security arrangements were reassessed. Communication narrowed. Eventually, Harry was no longer treated as a working component of the institution, but as an external variable, someone to be managed at a distance. In royal systems, that classification is devastating. Security is the clearest indicator of status inside the monarchy. It is not just about guards or vehicles. It is about infrastructure, logistics, advanced planning, diplomatic coordination, and legal authority. When royal protection is automatic, doors open before they are touched. When it is conditional, everything becomes fragile. Sources familiar with royal security protocols emphasize that protection is never removed casually. It requires review, documentation, and formal justification. And once scaled back, it fundamentally alters how a person lives. Travel becomes complicated. Residences become liabilities. Even attending public events requires negotiation. This context is critical when examining the reports that Harry has slept in a car. The image is shocking, but insiders caution against literal interpretation alone. In high-risk environments, vehicles are often the most controlled and secure spaces available during periods of transition. Sleeping in a car does not necessarily signal poverty. It signals displacement. It signals someone operating without guaranteed shelter or protection, someone moving constantly, someone without stable access. For a prince raised inside palaces, that reality is a form of exile. The withdrawal of protection also explains Harry's increasingly transient lifestyle. Short stays, temporary arrangements, limited appearances, constant movement. What once looked like freedom now looks like instability. Autonomy without institutional backing is not liberation, it is exposure. At the same time Harry's personal footing appears to weaken, attention has turned to a property that once symbolized his independence, a luxury mansion associated with his post-royal reinvention. Observers noted restricted access, sudden silence, and what appeared to be formal sealing procedures. No public explanation followed. A sealed mansion is not gossip. It is an administrative act. Legal analysts point out that properties tied to high-profile individuals are often sealed during restructuring, litigation, asset review, or control reassignment. It does not necessarily mean collapse, but it does mean intervention. And intervention means oversight. Royal financial observers suggest the sealing reflects a broader strategy of containment. Assets are leverage, and leverage, once removed, changes power dynamics completely. Behind all of this is a monarchy that has shifted decisively from reaction to prevention. For years, the institution absorbed public blows, interviews, accusations, documentaries, memoirs. Each time the crown responded with restraint. But restraint should never be mistaken for passivity. Insiders say the royal family has been recalibrating, updating security frameworks, refining succession messaging, and drawing firmer boundaries between personal narrative and institutional survival. The focus has moved away from damage control and toward future stability. That future centers on the next generation. While Harry's position has grown increasingly uncertain, sources indicate that Archie and Lilibet have become a quiet priority, not as public figures, but as long-term considerations. The monarchy thinks in decades. Children are not judged by current controversy, but by future impact. According to palace-adjacent sources, planning frameworks around the children emphasize predictability, insulation from volatility, and legal clarity. This does not require public announcements or dramatic moves. It happens through documents, protocols, and long-term safeguards. The institution has learned from history. Instability in childhood leads to instability in reign, and the crown no longer leaves such matters to chance. Perhaps the most telling element of this entire situation is what has not happened. There has been no public confrontation, no rebuttal interviews, no emotional appeals. The palace has chosen silence. In royal tradition, silence is not avoidance. It is authority. When the monarchy stops responding, it is because the decision has already been made. Engagement is no longer necessary. Outcomes are already in motion. Harry's public statements now exist outside the system they once challenged. They may generate headlines, but they no longer influence planning. The crown has moved forward. Exile in modern monarchy does not require banishment. It requires irrelevance. No operational role, no guaranteed access, no institutional protection. Harry remains a prince by birth, but increasingly, he is a prince without a platform. A man navigating uncertainty while the institution he once confronted consolidates power, secures its future, and prepares the next generation without him at the center. This is not punishment. This is resolution. And as assets fall silent, protections fade, and priorities shift, the message becomes unmistakable. The monarchy has drawn its line, and it is no longer negotiating. Because institutions like the British Crown do not act on emotion, they act on thresholds. And according to multiple palace-adjacent sources, Harry crossed one. The turning point was not a single interview, a single book, or a single documentary. It was accumulation, a pattern of behavior that, taken together, forced the institution to confront a question it had avoided for years. Is this still salvageable? By the time that question was formally asked inside royal strategy rooms, the answer had already begun to take shape. When a liability becomes structural. Royal insiders describe a shift that occurred quietly but decisively. Harry was no longer viewed as a public relations challenge. He was viewed as a structural risk. Not to reputation alone, but to security protocols, legal exposure, and institutional coherence. Every appearance created variables. Every statement triggered reviews. Every association required recalibration. At a certain point, the cost of managing the risk outweighed the benefit of maintaining the relationship. This is the moment institutions disengage. Not dramatically, not publicly, but permanently. Harry was not expelled. He was decoupled. The security line that could not be crossed. One of the most closely guarded realities of royal life is how seriously security breaches are treated. Insiders say concerns were raised not about danger to Harry, but unpredictability around him. Security relies on coordination, predictability, compliance. When those elements erode, protection becomes unsustainable. That is why protection becomes conditional before it is withdrawn. It allows the institution to document non-compliance, missed protocols, and escalating complexity. Once those records exist, the outcome is inevitable. Harry's loss of automatic protection was not a punishment, it was a conclusion. Why the mansion was sealed. The sealing of the mansion marked a second, more technical phase of separation. Legal analysts familiar with high-profile asset management explain that sealing is often used when ownership, control, or exposure must be temporarily frozen. This can include restructuring, litigation, risk management, or strategic disengagement from liability. In simple terms, it stops the bleeding. For the monarchy, assets tied directly or indirectly to ongoing controversy represent exposure, and exposure is unacceptable. Sources suggest the sealed property was not about collapse, but containment, ensuring that no further leverage, financial or narrative, could be derived from it. Once sealed, influence ends. Why reconciliation was taken off the table? Many assumed reconciliation was inevitable. History suggested it. Public sentiment demanded it. But insiders say reconciliation was quietly removed as an option long before the public realized. Why? Because reconciliation requires trust. And trust requires predictability. At some point, Harry became unpredictable, not in emotion, but in consequence. Each engagement produced ripple effects the institution could no longer control. For the monarchy, unpredictability is existential. The children and the long game. Behind every royal decision is the same unspoken priority: continuity. Sources indicate that Archie and Lilibet are viewed separately from their parents' conflicts. Children are not punished for adult decisions. They are planned for. This planning does not require physical custody changes or dramatic announcements. It happens through legal frameworks, succession positioning, and protective insulation. The monarchy's focus is not on headlines, but on decades. Stability now prevents crisis later. Why silence became final? The palace's refusal to respond publicly is not neglect, it is closure. Royal silence signals that engagement has ended, that the institution no longer sees value in dialogue, that the system is now protecting itself rather than repairing relationships. Historically, when the crown goes quiet, it is because the outcome is settled. Harry's relevance to institutional planning has ended. A prince without infrastructure. Harry still has fame, he still has recognition. But what he no longer has is infrastructure. No guaranteed protection, no institutional backing, no leverage. Fame without infrastructure is fragile, and institutions do not rebuild infrastructure once it has been dismantled. The endgame. This is not about revenge. It is not about humiliation. It is not about winning headlines. It is about survival. The monarchy has chosen continuity over conflict, future over nostalgia, and structure over sentiment. Harry's exile is not dramatic, but it is decisive. A mansion sealed, protection withdrawn, silence enforced, and a crown that has moved on.